inputs around domestic violence. I think domestic violence is something that does not get enough definition for people. I think people just think that it's physical violence and they don't understand the subtleties around it. And it's an extremely common pattern that forever, right, has been part of society, and it's just something that I think is really good to be aware of the subtle patterns within that dynamic, so we can look at how can we heal this and how can we move forward and not have this be part of our culture. And because to me there's certain things, abuse in particular, I kind of feel like we should be able to grow out of. I do think we should really work towards healing. These are really old ways of behaving and thinking, and I think we're capable of a lot more. I think we're capable of being kind and being, very intelligent and loving and compassionate. And I think it's important to look at these things and start working towards healing them, in a very, very strong manner. And when I teach self-defense, I teach self-defense for many reasons, but I do it because I think it is a very accelerated way to feel empowered, and everything helps. Therapy helps, and meditation helps, and all the somatic practices. I mean, there's so many things that help, but I think our society really has some unhealthy dynamics around power and control. So when I teach self-defense, I really talk to the people in the class about this. And sometimes I have males and females in my class, and I work with kids even. And I talk to them about, how can we have each other's back? And if you see someone bullying someone, like when you become especially like a teenager, things get really complex. And if they're at a party or something and there's something that's starting to be inappropriate, not okay, like how can we address behavior that is inappropriate, not okay, harmful, potentially harmful, and can lead to harmful patterns, right? Because if we don't find a way to stop this kind of inappropriate behavior, it can continue to grow and grow and grow, and not be stopped and become more abusive. So I think it's really important that we look at what are healthy boundaries, what is a really what allows us to not lose ourselves. And so I'm going to be talking about domestic violence and how you can get help from it today, and give you some examples of the subtleties. I like to make up these imaginary scenarios with imaginary names to kind of give you examples, because I think we get so numbed out. And I really think our society can be pretty numbed out. We have so much violence against women in the, like in our entertainment, which is really unhealthy. And the amount of violence that we have in our entertainment does, like in our movies and things like that, it does desensitize, our kind of registering what that really means. I think, it's a very, I think it's really important to kind of take a breath and step back and say, that's not something to make it thrilling in a movie. It's not something to just trigger our trauma response in society. Like what is that about, that adrenaline around that kind of abuse? And so, and I think it's just really important that we look at this in another way. Like, how can we heal all of this? And So I took a whole course on domestic violence years and years ago. It was like a 16-week course. And I thought it was really, really important information because it's really easy to define what's abusive. That's not, I think, the most challenging thing. What to recognize, what is more challenging is to recognize the subtle patterns, the scaffolding for domestic violence has its own particular flavor. And when I was getting my degree in psychology and working, in psychology and everything, I just don't feel like it gets enough, like just importance is what I really want to say. They talk about all of, the personality disorders and all these kinds of things, but this in itself has its own, like its own momentum, its own deep subconscious roots within our society. And and really within the whole world, this is just really an issue. And so anyway, what I would like to share with you, and my next upcoming shows will also be about how can you work towards being safe if you've kind of grown up with these type of issues, if it's affected and touched your life. Like, how can you start creating a safe container and finding healthy partners and healing your triggers, healing kind of the damage that's been done from growing up around the patterns of domestic violence. So I will be going there, and because I really want to talk about the healing and not only educate us on the pattern, but also how can we heal this? How can we be more conscious of it? And the more everyone reaches towards a healthier pattern, it's going to start shifting things. So next week when I talk, I will be talking about like how you can start dating in a way that's safe, start identifying what are some of the red flags, and kind of realizing if you're numbed out to certain behaviors or, because of abuse patterns, you settle or, somehow rationalize that it's okay for someone to treat you poorly, and it's not your fault. But we want to fight for a better life for yourself and a better life in general. And the more you fight for the healing within yourself, it's going to help society as a whole. So when we do not settle for bad behavior or mistreatment, it forces everyone to kind of learn and adjust to that. So you are helping many people just by helping yourself. So I would like to read the definition of domestic violence. I also will be speaking to where you can find help. And so the definition of domestic violence is more about the pattern that it can lead to violence. It doesn't mean it has to be physical violence. So domestic violence is any intrusion upon one's partner or ex-partner with intent wittingly or unwittingly to control, coerce, or do harm. Domestic violence can be verbal, it can be physical, sexual, emotional, economic, spiritual, social, or psychological. Domestic violence is a pattern of abusive behavior that escalates and may end in murder, suicide, or both. So all this paperwork is from this wonderful, wonderful, wonderful organization. I really honor the people that do this type of work. It's so needed within our society, and it's just so important. And so all this paperwork is from the YWCA. And this organization in Sonoma County, and it's all over the place. It originated in DC, and they are they empower women. And also this doesn't just happen to women. This isn't just a gender kind of issue. This can happen with men, and I will speak to later on if a male grows up with domestic violence, how that when you grow up with domestic violence, I think it can affect you to either become abusive yourself or to become an abusee, right? Where you choose someone that will abuse you in the same ways. So there's also the pattern of sometimes men grow up with a domestic violence situation, and maybe they choose to become, and I don't want to say choose, it's not their fault, but the path that ends up being their path in life. And this stuff, it's really so profound, the effect on the children, that it's pretty much, I think, impossible to not end up having struggles with it. So there's just no judgment or blame with this. But if let's say that male grew up and they didn't want to be abusive in that way, but they chose a partner that was, very domineering and very controlling and using abusive tactics, whether it's emotional abuse, whether it's verbal abuse, controlling the whole life. I mean, it can go both ways. This can happen to men too. And so really it's all about power and control. And I will go into that more. But first I want to finish talking about this organization. So if you are someone that needs help, their phone number, this is in Sonoma County, is 707-546-1234. 546-1234. And the National Domestic Violence Hotline is 800-799-7233. 800-799-7233. And that's for the National Domestic Violence Hotline. So this organization will give you child care if you're in a crisis. So if you are in a violent relationship and you're trying to get help, you're trying to figure it out, they can help watch your kids. If you have kids, they can connect you with shelters and education and support and counseling. So, I mean, this organization, I think this is an amazing thing. And also, I know people personally in my life that are part of this program where they have been the support system for women when they need to go to, or just anyone that's been, in an abusive domestic violence marriage relationship, and they have to go to court, right? Whether it's custody or the divorce or whatever it is, they have to go to court, that they actually go with these people to support them. And I know someone that runs the groups, these kind of groups around education and support around domestic violence. And now, since COVID, they just have Zooms, which I actually think, maybe that's better, right? They don't have to go to court and be physically around the person that was abusive. So this program still runs, but more through Zoom now. But anyway, this is some really powerful stuff, and you can get information from them. And there's also a book I want to share with you before I delve further into this. And again, the title of this book, it's a really old school book. And I went into the wellness field at a very young age. And so I read this book a really long time ago, and I read it again. I mean, it's such a great book, but the title of the book always makes people cringe a little bit. So you have to move past the title and just know that this book, I really have found, it was one of the first books to talk about these type of patterns. It was written in 1986, and very, very, very powerful. And again, it's not about gender here. This could be a man going through this situation. So man or woman, this book will, the first half of the book tells you stories. The second half of the book tells you how to work on this pattern to heal yourself, to stand up for yourself, to find independence, to feel like you found your self-respect again, and if there's any way to salvage the relationship, even if it has abusive patterns, how you can do that. But I rarely, out of all the things I've studied, to find a book that is this empowering, that shows you step by step how you could actually heal this kind of pattern, and even to try to heal the dysfunction of the relationship rather than just the only answer is to leave. I thought that was so profound, because the big hurdle with this dynamic is most of the time the biggest challenge is to leave an abusive relationship. There's like this hook. That's kind of the big barrier, is leaving. So the name of this book, very profound for anyone, man or woman, that has been dealing with domestic violence pattern within the relationship. The book is called Men Who Hate Women and the Women Who Love Them, When Loving Hurts and You Don't Know Why. It is written by Dr. Susan Forward and Joan Torres. And all I got to say is really one of the best books I have read in my whole life. It is just fantastic. And it is just so insightful, so real, not judgmental, showing you how you can, find healing for this so you can have safety in your life. Very profound. Okay, so back to the definition of domestic violence. So one of the things, if you are to Google the power and control wheel, which is one of the things that they utilize to educate people that when they're learning about domestic violence. And so basically, domestic violence is all about power and control. It's about someone using their anger, their moods to affect their mate in a way where they feel like they have to walk on eggshells. It's almost like there's like this pending doom that's going to happen if they don't do what their partner wants, like in a scary way. This is like there's going to be some severe emotional consequence, or if there's physical violence, there will be physical consequences. So there is a consequence kind of dynamic that they're holding over you, and you have to kind of succumb to this, right? So I'm going to read this to you. And you can Google the power and control wheel. This is fantastic. So the power and control wheel, there's several different sections. So this is what it looks like. And so basically there's like this pattern that happens within the dynamic. And basically they talk about, and also just so you know, for complete non-judgmental viewpoint into this, because this is a very, very pervasive pattern within our culture and kind of within the world. All right, this is really old school bad stuff we should be done with. So basically, domestic violence often doesn't start that way. The partner that's abusive might have been very charming in the beginning, and very, appeared to be very loving, and or maybe their possessiveness or their controlling looked like passion, looked like deep love, concern, whatever, but it was unhealthy, the level of it. And as the relationship progresses, it develops into more and more and more an abusive pattern. So there's like this honeymoon stage that they talk about in the beginning where everything seems great, everything's going fine, and then there's kind of this build up to this climax of like slowly kind of this anger. So if someone expresses their control in a very angry way, okay, there's going to be a buildup to that irritation, to that blow up, right? So there's this buildup, and then so the other partner in the relationship feels like they're walking on eggshells. They can feel this kind of climax building, and then something happens, So if there's actual physical violence, then often there's a physical situation. If it's not fully physical, but maybe there's like a emotional violence, that's kind of my own term, but like let's say they just break a bunch of stuff, right? So they're breaking a bunch of stuff. It's very scary for the other partner. They feel threatened. There's verbal abuse or something like that. It could look like that. So there's, this explosive situation that happens, right? And so it can be emotionally violent. It can feel, scary, unsafe. It can be physically harmful. And then the abusive partner goes, to the apologizes, try to make it okay. I'm so sorry. I love you. It'll never happen again. And then it goes back into the honeymoon stage, right? Where there's all this nice behavior and they're like behaving, right? So there's this cycle. It's really, so when it first starts, the mate that's being abused gets really hooked in because there is also sometimes nice behavior thrown into all of this, where they do feel loved, where they do feel some kindness. So their definition of love, usually that person grew up with some level of abuse, so their definition of love isn't what they deserve. Okay, because everyone deserves healthy love. Everyone deserves to be treated kindly. So I'm going to read to you some of the stuff off of the power and control wheel, and then what I would like to read is the opposite of it, which is fantastic. It is the equality wheel. Okay, so you can look both of these up. And so here's the equality wheel. And what is fantastic about this is you can look at the discrepancies between them, because when you grow up with abuse, you get really desensitized to bad behavior. So you just don't often know how to put healthy behavior into perspective, into words. So when you read the equality wheel, you're like, wow, yeah, that's how it should be. So it's really good to sometimes look at these things and say, well, what are my standards? What do I feel like I deserve, right? So when I work as a wellness coach with people, I'm really reflecting kind of what I'm hearing from people, and emotionally what I'm hearing them say, and kind of how it's playing out in their life, and really looking at these layers. So again, my name is Michelle Love. You're listening to Dynamic Change, and this show is on KPCA-LP in Petaluma, a free-range radio station, and I am talking about domestic violence, and to educate us and to also uphold the belief that I think we can heal dramatically. I think we always have the ability to do that within our society, and so I challenge everyone to find as much wellness as possible within themselves, which helps heal society as a whole. So I want to talk about this because I don't think it's talked about enough, these patterns of how they are defined, okay? So domestic violence does not always contain actual physical violence. It contains a dysfunctional, abusive dynamic around control, okay? So the power and control wheel, which you can Google and find, And so the dynamics of this abusive controlling dynamic, there's intimidation that's involved. So, and again, men and women, can be abusive. So it's not about gender or anything like that. And it's not about judgment, but I want to really define this. So if our abusive person, they could, intimidation is often used, and they can use emotional threats. So they can use gestures, looks, and actions. They can break things. They can smash things. They can destroy cherished things of the person they're trying to intimidate in the relationship. They can abuse their pets. That's something else. They can display weapons. They can do emotional threats that they will do self-harm to themselves or to others. And I think a really important thing with the intimidation, which is next week when I talk about, what are some red flags and how you can look at developing healthy boundaries and noticing what are some signs when you're in a relationship with someone, when they say cruel things. And I'm not talking about dark humor because, I have a great sense of humor. And so it's not about, really like having a dark humor or satire, being sarcastic, but it's the quality of it where it contains cruelty. That's what you want to pay attention. So pay attention to. So if you're with someone and they're making comments about abusing animals and they know you love animals, and just in general, that's not a really nice place to come from and not a funny thing to joke around about, but abusing and harming animals, when they're talking about harming things, and doing things in a way that feel scary, to intimidate you or to maybe test you to see if they talked about cruelty to someone else or to an animal or something like that, to see your reaction is really important to pay attention to, because cruelty, in my opinion, is not something that's very humorous. So yes, we can all enjoy the movie about someone falling down and, having the embarrassing moment. And that stuff can be very funny. Life is very comical. You have to have a sense of humor for life. Things like that are going to happen. But cruelty, sadistic cruelty, is not funny. It's not. That type of intentional, really wanting to harm something. So when someone kind of brags about it or they're talking about it and it just doesn't quite feel right, that's the kind of stuff you want. Those are red flags. So when your body, deep inside your body, says, "Ooh, God, I don't know why they're even saying that," that's what you want to pay attention to. Okay? So another thing is emotional abuse is part of the power and control wheel. So they often will put the partner down. And just even in subtle ways, they may call them names. They play a lot of mind games. They will try to make you feel like you're crazy. That's another thing that is often part of this dynamic, is they are kind of messing with your mind to try to make you question yourself, so you are easier to control. Okay? Public humiliation, guilt trips. I'm reading off the control wheel here. Sarcastic jokes. And again, I would say sarcastic jokes that have a sadistic, really cruel quality, not a good-natured, healthy sarcasm. I'm talking about something that doesn't feel right. And it feels very, very mean-spirited. Okay? So that's, because there's a fine line sometimes. And they will ignore their partner's feelings. Okay? Like they're just not important. And this is a way to break someone down. So if their feelings, their thoughts, their well-being is not important, it's a way to break someone down. So the power and control wheel and domestic violence patterns, they're trying to break down that person that's being abused in the relationship so they're easier to control. So they flaunt their affairs, okay, and say the partner is crazy. So just as I'm talking about these things, I think that it's just important to pay attention to what we allow in relationships. Sometimes a relationship is unhealthy. We didn't realize we need to get out of there. Sometimes it's that. Sometimes it's like, okay, we're both mature enough to grow and have healthier patterns within the relationship, and you go to counseling and sometimes you can work that out. But you really want to just be honest with yourself sometimes and just say, do I have boundaries? Do I have limits with what I'm okay with? Do I have standards on what's okay with how I'm treated? And really look at that and say, do I need to up my standards? Okay. So another thing on the power and control wheel is isolation. And so the abusive partner is controlling what the partner does, who they see and talk to, what they need and where they go, limiting their partner's outside involvement, using jealousy to justify actions in which they use to alienate their friends and family. So, and that's really, so when they get really isolated like that, the danger in that is they start to feel like for them to get out of the relationship, that it becomes to feel more and more impossible because they have made their whole life about that relationship with the abusive person. So they feel like there's no one that could help, no one's going to understand, no one's going to judge them. They feel disempowered. And as a self-defense instructor, which I am, I talk about these patterns all the time because I want everyone to be empowered. I want these patterns to be healed. I think they're so destructive to everyone having a more fulfilling life with healthy connection. I think this is just really a big deal. So I talk about how we can really look at what's going on, how we can break away from unhealthy patterns. And when you break away from something that's unhealthy, you are forcing the people that are abusive to also adjust to some extent. It's like standing up to the bully. Every time we stand up to this abusive behavior and the people that choose to be abusive, it forces them to kind of check themselves. It's not tolerated. So it's very powerful to work on these issues. Okay. And I think this is important stuff. I'm a parent, and I do think it's really important to also communicate these kind of how we can have healthy relationships with our kids. That things like this are not okay. They're not passion. They're not love. So another thing on the power and control wheel is minimizing, denying, and blaming. So the abuser always blames the person that's being abused. Making light of the abuse and not taking partner's concerns seriously. Saying the abuse didn't happen. Blaming victim for the abuse. Saying all couples fight this way. So because this is a big topic, I will break it down in the next couple of shows that I do. There is healthy ways to have an argument and work that out. And that's a really wonderful thing. It's important to work things out. So this is talking about noticing when it is unhealthy. And also, it's like dealing with a narcissist. It's all about dealing with the abusive pattern, the abusive person, it's all their way. So when you're in a relationship like this, the abusive person, it's all about their viewpoint. They're always right, you're always wrong. They're always going to blame you. And they are the filter of every aspect of the relationship is filtered through. It's really like gaslighting. It's like a brainwash. So everything is filtered through their abusive filter. So it's like everything is utilized for their benefit, to be right, that it's okay for them to do this abusive pattern. So all the guilt, all the shame, all the humiliation, and all the blame is always projected on the abused partner. Okay, so these are some clues. Like if you are having elements of this within your life, it's always projected on the person that's being abused. It's always their fault. Everything is their fault. Even if you're going through, when I talked about the cycle where, after something really bad happens and they're trying to make nice at that point, the abusive person will be like, I'm sorry, like even if they at that point are, kind of putting themselves down, I shouldn't do this or whatever. It's like a fake, I'm going to own that I should be better. Even that is manipulative. Even that, because it's not a genuine, if it was a genuine working on themselves, they would go find help and they wouldn't take their issues, their anger out on the other person in the relationship. Another one, this is a really awful one, I'm sorry, but I have to say it, is using the children. I think this is just the lowest. But they threaten to take the children away, uses visitation as a way to harass the partner. So when a child has to go between the homes, and so again, maybe there wasn't physical violence, but they may emotionally have these patterns. They will use the children to hurt the other partner, and tells the children lies about the other partner, uses the children to relay messages, interrogates children about the partner, and threatens to hurt the children. So, these are really low, despicable behaviors. Okay, so, and it's better to do what you need to do. Get away from these people, because people like this, this is very deliberate behavior, and it's very deliberately abusive behavior and controlling behavior and mind control even, like gaslighting you. It really is, to make you think you're crazy. This is very deliberate. That's what you need to know. This is very manipulative and deliberate. It is better to struggle, maybe be very poor, whatever it ends up being, that's okay. It's better to struggle and do the right thing for yourself and your children than feel like there's no choice and stay in a situation that perpetuates this level of abuse. And there is a lot of help out there. And again, I'll read the phone numbers and places where you can find help. And also, this is another fantastic example. The abusive person assumes superiority. So they make all the big decisions. They define all the roles within the relationship. And for the partners, it treats the other partner like a servant, assumes to be a better person, and know more about everything. So in my book, everyone's equal. I just kind of think we're all human. We're all imperfect, and everyone's brilliant in certain ways. Everyone's talented in different ways and everything. And so, them assuming, to me, anyone assuming that they're above anyone else is so just, there's no truth in that. And then another thing is economic abuse. So preventing the partner from getting or keeping a job. Here's another one that's very interesting. When I read this, refusing to work. So they could be, the abusive partner in the relationship could also refuse to work. That's interesting. That's not what I always would go to in my brain. So that's a really interesting one too. Ruining the partner's credit. That's another interesting one. Making the partner ask for money. Taking the partner's money. Forcing partner to sign over properties or their inheritance. Not letting partner know about family finances or having access to money or information. So these are all, that's the economic abuse. And the last one will be coercion and threats. Threats to do something to hurt the partner, threats to leave the partner, throw the partner out, commit suicide. And that's something, that manipulation I have heard from many people over the years. I've worked with a lot with people that were, have been through domestic violence, were in domestic violence, people that have been through trauma. I've worked with this stuff a lot. And it can come in so many different little flavors and examples. But, someone saying they're going to commit suicide to control their partner, it's intense. And sometimes we don't think of it like, oh, they're using that to control me, right? But it is. So another one is threatening to report the partner to welfare. And further abuse or threatening to further abuse the partner if the partner does not drop the charges. Coerce the partner to do illegal things. So, and I've heard also that this pattern, I had a delightful woman lawyer I was talking to not too long ago, was telling me about with people from like immigrants. Stuff like this can really come up where because they're an immigrant and they end up in a domestic violence kind of relationship because they get a lot of threats of, I'll report you, get deported, or whatever it is, that they will be controlled in those ways. All these things are awful. I mean, the desire to control someone and hurt them, to me, this is really, it's just not okay. We need to, work on supporting these kind of issues to heal. So again, I'm going to read, before I move on to the equality wheel, I do want to read some phone numbers to you again. So the National Domestic Violence Hotline is 800-799-7233. 800-799-7233. The YWCA organization, which is a nonprofit in Sonoma County, the hotline is 707-546-1234. 707-546-1234. And again, these numbers are for when you need support and help and safety when you're in a domestic violence situation. So they can provide childcare, give you assistance on how to go to a shelter, how to leave an abusive relationship, how to pack a bag, keep it somewhere safe, maybe at the neighbor's house, and start developing a plan. If you were in a really bad relationship that was dangerous, I would recommend, calling these numbers and packing up a bag and maybe keeping it at the neighbor's house. And when the abusive partner is away at work, you have an escape plan. You have the bag packed, the kid's bag packed, and so it's in a place that's not visible, so the partner's not going to see it. And when they are gone, you go. and you just go somewhere for a while to get away from it so you can feel the difference. When you're in it, it can be challenging to leave it. But when you can get away from it and feel, oh my God, that was so toxic, so abusive, you can get clarity. So I really recommend, getting help if this is something that, it has been or is part of your life. And again, the book, I love the book. You have to not be triggered by the title. Again, men can benefit from this help. Women can benefit from this help. It's an old book. It was written in 1986. I've read it twice. It's fantastic. This book can educate you on these patterns and show you solutions to these dynamics within a relationship, and also how to work on healing them with your partner if there is a way to salvage this relationship. There's stories in this book about people that worked with the abusive partner and changed, because you can change your behavior as the abusee to also, sometimes if the abusive partner is willing to work on themselves, to shift everything, because both people have to shift. That's the thing, for any kind of healthy, productive, salvageable thing to come up for the relationship. So the book shows how these women shifted their behavior to not tolerate the abuse anymore. And there's I think 2 stories in the book where the abusive partner actually was able to heal and say, yeah, I was really abusive. It's not okay. And I want to change that, and worked with a therapist, and they did it with a therapist. And I mean, that is an awesome story, because it's not just the person being abused getting safe and free, which is fantastic, right? Awesome ending to the story. But the more dynamic that helps everybody is the abusive person waking up and saying, I don't want to be like this anymore. So awesome. So this book, I have great respect for. I recommend it a lot. So the book is called Men Who Hate Women and the Women Who Love Them. And it says, When Loving Hurts and You Don't Know Why. It's written by Dr. Susan Forward and Joan Torres. So now, before I finish, I want to read an announcement, and then I'll finish with the equality wheel. So an announcement of one of the shows here on KPCA LP in Petaluma, the 8 o'clock rock show. It's on Tuesdays from 8 to 10 p.m. It's hosted by Greg Randall. The show features Greg Randall picking all the music you need to hear from all decades of rock and roll and its roots. Spinning selections from his own collection, he will crossfade the pollinators of rock and roll with punk, power pop, garage, Americana, indie rock, blues, glam, and beyond, with one mission: to save rock and roll one record at a time. I love that. That sounds fantastic. So again, my name is Michelle Love. You're listening to Dynamic Change. And you can always go to my YouTube station to see the other shows I have done. I'm here every week from 11 to 12. The name of the show is Dynamic Change. My YouTube station is Michelle Love with Dynamic Change and Wellness. You can also go to my website and see the classes and wellness coaching and support groups and self-defense and different things I do. And that's dynamicchangeandwellness.com. And you can also email me there if there's something that you would like discussed on the shows. And because I come up with wellness strategies to heal certain patterns. That's why I do this show. And so I want to finish with the equality wheel, which I thought was so fantastic. So again, you can Google these: the power and control wheel of domestic violence and the equality wheel. I'm sorry, I know that's backwards, but that's what it says. Okay, so this is a non-violence equality wheel, and what this is comparing, so we have the power and control wheel that shows the abusive pattern of an abusive partner within the relationship controlling the other partner with their anger, with their moods, and kind of beating them down emotionally, psychologically, sometimes physically. So, but this is talking about the exact opposite. What a healthy relationship has equality. So there's non-threatening behavior in a healthy relationship. There's talking and acting so that the other partner feels safe and comfortable. So this is how a relationship it should feel to receive healthy dynamics in a relationship. So this is good to imagine. Do you feel this? Okay. So you should feel safe and comfortable to express your feelings and doing things naturally, rather than kind of putting it through a filter. How are they going to react if I do this? See, that's like a red flag. Am I not expressing myself out of apprehension of what the repercussions will be with my partner, like in a way where it's either fearful, you feel like you're walking on eggshells, and it can be a severe emotional reaction, anger. But it's a very it can be subtle, but it feels, at the basis of it, I would say there's fear. Even if it's just an emotional repercussion that's extreme, you'll feel anxiety. See, these are the kinds of things we want to look at. It's not like, oh man, I'm really going to upset my partner if I do this and I'm going to have to deal with it. But if there's like anxiety and fear, that's something you want to pay attention to and kind of just consider if you need to look at that, okay? So there's also respect in a nonviolent relationship. There's listening to the partner. There's non-judgmentality. There's being emotionally affirmed, and there's understanding. They value your opinion. There's trust and support. The other partner is supported. Their goals in life are supported. They respect the partner's right to their feelings, their friends, activities, and opinions. There's honesty and accountability. Accepting responsibility for themselves, so rather than projecting and blaming, they, say, oh, I screwed up and this is what I did and I'm going to work on that, right? Acknowledging past use of abuse. So admitting being wrong, because we do all screw up, and sometimes we are angry or we yell or something comes up, but if you can own that and say, I really need to work on that, and I'm going to, and acknowledge that, because no one's going to be perfect. That's wonderful, Communicating openly and being truthful, really being open with their heart communication and everything. Responsible parenting, okay? Sharing parental responsibilities, being a positive, nonviolent role model for the children. So really showing the kids that, things should be worked out in a loving way, in a respectful way. So even if they're like, the kids go between the homes and their parents are divorced or whatever, showing that there's respect for the other parent, and that their opinion matters, and that you'll work it out, and it's not the kid's responsibility, and there's no bullying or putting the other parent down. It's super important for the psyche and emotional well-being of these kids. Shared responsibility, mutually agreeing on a fair distribution of work and making family decisions together. Economic partnership, making money decisions together, making sure both partners benefit from financial arrangements. It's interesting, right? Sometimes we don't think about these things. It should be a feeling of partnership, of sharing, of doing things together, which is an equal. That's a healthy bond. It's an equal movement through life together, and so it's a very different dynamic. This healthy wheel here, right? And then the last one is negotiation and fairness, seeking mutually satisfying resolutions to conflict, accepting change, being willing to compromise. So, when you're dealing with someone abusive, they're not willing to compromise. They want it all their way, right? And so some flavors of this, and again, you can go to their website for YWCA. Again, I just really honor people that do this type of work. I think it's so needed. And you can look up, they have like questionnaires about what is abuse, it's like a checklist and you can go through it. And I think it's really important, like they have all those like personality, checks that they have in like, I don't know, like magazines and stuff like that. This kind of stuff, they have stuff like this for, abuse. And sometimes you want to take a moment, a pause in life and say, okay, do I have any emotional, verbal, and psychological abuse patterns in my life? And maybe just go through it and just say, and maybe it's not nothing extreme, but look at it and say, oh, I really, I need to work on having a boundary with this. This happens, and I allow a certain amount of bad behavior, and there's no judgment with that. We all have things to work on. But looking at, sometimes we lose sight of what is abusive. It can be subtle, and look at that and stand up for ourselves and strengthen those muscles to be strong for ourselves. And so anyway, I'm so grateful for being able to talk about this. I think it is such an important topic to heal domestic violence, to heal these patterns. And I think as a society, we need to always reach for learning how to have healthier, more loving, kind experiences within our connections with others. And I really support fighting the good fight for the people that need help. So I think that's really powerful. And anyone that does need help, I really hope you consider maybe calling one of the organizations and moving towards that, because there is help. And that's what's really wonderful. So when I was Googling some of this to see what was currently, because I took this class a really long time ago, and it was before COVID, and I know things have shifted and changed, but if you Google them, the YWCA, I mean, it's fantastic. There is a lot of help out there. So powerful. Thank you so much. Hopefully I'll